All right, so Tommy and I just wanted to jump in the studio to talk about, again, the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is the Maryland father that the United States government sent to the mega prison in El Salvador, admitted in court that they did so mistakenly. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. We just got a ruling last night from the Supreme Court. It's a unanimous opinion from the court that the government must take steps to facilitate the release of Garcia. And we're going to talk about everything that's swirling around that. The case, there was another hearing today where the judge who originally decided the case talked to the government and asked them what the fuck they were doing to get him back, and didn't get many answers. So we're going to talk about that. But just at the start, once again, U.S. government, the fucking Trump administration, wrong again.
Wrong, lying, malicious, evil, seemingly happy to let a man rot in a gulag in El Salvador who they admit shouldn't be there.
Stephen Miller had been yelling about it, saying they were right and the terrorists will be apprehended and the president's power is blah, blah, blah. And we're going to win in court. J.D. Vance has been bitching about it. Caroline Leavitt. All these administration assholes have been saying how right they are and how they were going to win this one in court. Well, unanimous decision from the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, all the rest of them, that the government needs to figure out a way to get this guy out of jail. All right, so we got some pretty big Supreme Court news about the Trump deportation policy, where they just round people up and send them to a foreign gulag in El Salvador. And this particularly is around the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's the Maryland father that the government admitted that they accidentally sent to El Salvador. And this is something that we've all been yelling about here. I've been getting in Twitter fights with J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller over this. We've been interviewing folks about this. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, just to be even more specific, there was an immigration court order preventing his deportation to El Salvador because this immigration court judge back in 2019 feared that he would face persecution from the criminal gangs that the Trump administration is now saying he's a part of.
Yes, and he got to, just so everyone knows, in case you hadn't followed the case, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he's from El Salvador. He arrived in this country in 2011 when he was 16 years old, and he has never been charged criminally with anything. And after being here for a number of years, in 2019, as Tommy said, he got caught up. He was loitering outside of a Home Depot with a couple of other men, and he encountered the police, and that's when the ICE held him, and they tried to say he was MS-13. The only evidence they had for that was a Bulls hoodie that he was wearing, and then an anonymous informant who no one has been able to find that said he was part of a gang, a chapter of MS-13 that exists only in Western New York, and he's never been to New York. He lives in Maryland.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me that ICE has decided that anyone with Bulls gear or Michael Jordan tattoos has to be a gang member, and maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Michael Jordan's the most popular athlete that's ever lived.
I mean, it's clear now that the tattoos for Tren de Aragua, the Bulls stuff, meaning you're in MS-13, these guys are not. This is not a rigorous process to determine whether people are part of these gangs.
Yeah, and what's so, in fact, when you talk to experts about gangs in Latin America, they say that Tren de Aragua has never had gang tattoos.
Right, yes.
Ever. No Venezuelan gangs, in fact, have gang tattoos. Probably for the obvious reason, which it puts a pretty clear spotlight on you for the authorities if they want to arrest you.
Yeah, and so now this entire thing about tattoos is just that's Tren de Aragua, MS-13 now. I guess it's Bulls hoodie and random person saying that you were part of a gang in a state that you've never been in. So anyway, as a result of all that, ICE keeps him in detention for a year, and then they say, you know what? Yes, he's technically deportable, but he cannot be legally deported back to El Salvador because he will face persecution. And so from 2019 until just middle of March, he has had a steady job. He's never been in trouble for anything. He's actually done regular check-ins with ICE. Yeah. And he
had a permit from the Department of Homeland Security to legally work in the U.S.
Yes, and he's married to an American citizen. He cares for his 5-year-old son with autism and some other disabilities. He has 2 kids from a previous relationship. And so he's suddenly apprehended by ICE, arrested, and without a hearing, being in front of a judge, getting a lawyer, anything like that, is just sent to El Salvador. And the only reason his family knew that is because his wife saw him on television. In some of the pictures, the snuff films that the Trump administration has been releasing.
Yeah, well, and that's actually pretty standard for almost all of the 283 men who were sent to the terrorism confinement center prison down in El Salvador. To this day, I don't believe the government has released a list of their names. It was obtained by CBS News, and then a lot of the families saw these films that were put out by Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, who likes to advertise the cruelty of his prison system to his population and now to the world.
Yes. And so this story, I believe The Atlantic broke the story March 31st, and about how the government, because finally when they found out that he was down there in El Salvador in this gulag, they get a lawyer, the family gets a lawyer, and they go to court, and the Department of Justice, the Trump's Department of Justice, admits in court that they sent him to El Salvador, to this prison, in error, and that it was an administrative oversight. Mm-hmm. So they admitted that this guy had a legal protection not to be deported to El Salvador, and basically the administration is like, what can we do? We can't bring him back. What are we supposed to do? So this is where we start getting involved. So I think you were tweeting about this when it started. I was tweeting about this. I just randomly tweeted like the Atlantic story and said, any comment on this? Marco Rubio, how about you, JD Vance, Elon Musk? Just went for the most sort of online people in the Trump administration. JD Vance quote tweets me and says, "My comment is that according to the court document you apparently didn't read, he was a convicted MS-13 gang member with no legal right to be here. My further comment is that it's gross to get fired up about gang members getting deported while ignoring citizens they victimize."
Gross.
Yeah, I know. So first of all, he's just it's ironic that he accused me of not reading the court docs, because he didn't read the court document, because the court document said that he had a legal protection from being deported specifically to El Salvador.
Also, for those who are wondering, when something this egregious and awful happens, is there ever accountability within the U.S. government? Yes, there was some accountability. The Department of Justice suspended the attorney who admitted to making a mistake. So the people who told the truth in court, because you can't lie in court, right? These pieces of shit like J.D. Vance and the DHS spokespeople and whatever, they can lie and say whatever they want about these individuals in the court of public opinion. But if you lie in court, you can be disbarred.
Well, and that was and that happened. That happened even later, because then the lawyers for Garcia keep challenging this. They get to a Maryland judge, a federal judge named Judge Paula Zinnes. She was an Obama appointee, and she is furious as she goes through this case with the government. And this lawyer is basically like, this lawyer for the Department of Justice, career lawyer, who, by the way, had just been promoted a couple of weeks earlier by the Trump administration for his great work on sanctuary cities. So this is not some like liberal squish.
No, not
right?
a big liberal at all.
And this is not even just like a nonpartisan. So
15-year veteran.
15-year veteran. And this lawyer is like, I wish I had better answers for you. I have no answers from the government about why this is. She's like, you don't have any answers for me? He's like, no. And he's like, I wish the government had more for me, right? Because she was also saying, like, is the government have evidence that this person is MS-13? Anything more than the Bulls hoodie? No, we have nothing. So this person is put on leave, and then it's appealed again to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals also says, like, hey, no, the government needs to get this guy back, because they should not have deported him to El Salvador, and they have admitted it. So then finally it goes to the Supreme Court. And we're recording this on Friday. Yesterday, on Thursday, the Supreme Court rules, and it is a unanimous opinion, rules that the government must facilitate the release of Garcia. And Judge Zinnes' original order was the government must facilitate and effectuate the release of Garcia. And all the Supreme Court said was facilitate for sure, effectuate, not clear what that means. So we got to ask the judge to be more specific about what effectuate means. Basically, the challenge here is the Department of Justice, Trump administration view here is courts cannot compel the government to do anything that might interfere with the government's foreign policy. The president has the power to make foreign policy, to deal with national security, and the courts cannot stand in the way of that.
And this is true in this case, where they're pretending that they have no leverage to get this man back from El Salvador, even though the president of El Salvador is coming to the White House next week. Nayib Bukele is in the White House for a quote-unquote working meeting, mostly about these detention issues next week. Mr. Abreu could jump on the plane. Like, it would be pretty easy to just hop a ride there. But so this is their position in this case, which is the courts can't tell them what to do about anything. And then it's quite similar to the bullshit story they sold when they ignored a judge's order not to deport these men to El Salvador in the first place.
Yes.
When clearly the judge had given a verbal and then a written order saying turn the planes around that were taking these 283 Venezuelan men to El Salvador to this transnational gulag, but that order was ignored.
Yes. And so basically what's happened, so the Supreme Court rules, and I don't know, we were recording Positive America. I was recording with Dan right when the ruling came down, and I was like, holy shit, like a unanimous order, this is good, what's going to happen? Although there was part of me when I read it that I was like, oh fuck, it feels like good news, but now the Trump administration could either choose to follow the court's order or just defy the court.
Yeah.
Now, like they have been doing in some of these other cases where they're kind of sort of defying the court, is they're not just coming out and saying like, oh, you know, Justice Roberts has made his opinion and has made his decision and now let him enforce it kind of thing. Like, they're not. What they're trying to do is every time they seem to lose in court, and especially with the Supreme Court, they basically take the decision and pretend that it's a victory for them.
Yeah, they spit it however they want. Stephen Miller goes on TV and says it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to Donald Trump.
Yes. And so I had been tweeting about it yesterday, and Stephen Miller, so I was like, the Supreme Court says that he does have a legal right to be here, and you have to bring him back, because I was tweeting that at JD Vance, and Stephen Miller says, false to me. He's like, SCOTUS rejected the lower court and made clear that a district court judge cannot exercise Article 2 foreign affairs powers. The illegal alien terrorist is in the custody and control of a sovereign foreign nation. Now, that is wrong. That is false. That is not what the court said at all. The court did... Look, the truth of this is, if Garcia gets back, it is true that the United States government could find a way to deport him to somewhere that's not El Salvador, which is because the President of the United States has a lot of power to figure out, you know, the President of the United States has a lot of power to deport undocumented immigrants, even legal residents, even green card holders, as we are finding out right now. But the idea that the Supreme Court just rejected the lower court is completely inaccurate, because what the court had said in this ruling and in the ruling, the Alien Enemies Act ruling, is deportations without due process are illegal. And the idea that the government is not even going to try to, when they admit that they made a mistake in court, deporting someone to a foreign prison in perpetuity, they're not even going to try to get them back. Like, that's wrong. And that all 9 justices of the Supreme Court have said that now.
And just stepping back, like, the idea that the United States government could just wrongly send any individual to a foreign country to rot in hell in a prison and then act like they have no power or obligation to get them back, like, that's an insane loophole. Like, that, we don't want to live in a country that does things like that. And for these guys to for Stephen Miller, for JD Vance, for all of these people to just not care in any form or fashion about the substance of what we're talking about, you wrongly, illegally, immorally, unjustly sent a man to rot in hell in a foreign prison, and you just don't give a fuck.
And like, Justice Sotomayor wrote sort of a concurring opinion in the most recent opinion that the Supreme Court handed down over this, and she basically said, and this was like a summary of what she wrote in the Alien Enemies Act dissent as well. She said the Trump administration's position, quote, implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. And I was just reading this from Ed Whelan, who is a very conservative legal scholar.
Yeah.
Like Brett Kavanaugh's good
Their
buddy. Yeah, just wrote this in National Review, and he quoted Sotomayor in his post. And hold on. Oh, yeah, he goes, and then he writes in parentheses, the fact that I am agreeing with Sotomayor signals how ludicrous DOJ's position is. But it's like the details of Garcia's case, while horrifying and like want this guy to be back with his family, while that's important, the larger principle here is if the Trump administration wins here or just doesn't bring him back or doesn't try to bring him back and defies the Supreme Court or defies the court, what Sotomayor just said is what can happen going forward.
Yeah.
They can round up any person in this country, including citizens, and as long as they can get them out of the country before a court notices or before a lawyer notices, they don't have to bring them back. That is absurd.
And just remember how they executed those two flights of the 283 Venezuelan men to El Salvador in the first place. Mm-hmm. They had Trump secretly sign the Alien Enemies Act executive order. They tried to have a plane take off that day. There was some kind of mechanical issue or something that prevented it from happening. So the ACLU and a bunch of lawyers sniffed out what was happening. Then the next day, they loaded them on to another couple of planes, even though they knew there was going to be this emergency hearing, had the planes take off anyway, had the planes land in Honduras. The judge very clearly said, get those men back, turn the planes around. They ignored that order and then flew these men from Honduras to El Salvador anyway to rot in hell in this prison. And just like on Pod Save the World this week, I talked to a human rights expert in El Salvador named Noah Bullock. He runs this group called Cristasol. And his group has been documenting systemic torture and murder and mistreatment of prisoners in these prisons. And one of the things that really stood out to me was he said that the guards in the prisons are known for saying, you won't leave here walking to people who come in. He said that his forensic investigators had been out that week looking into the death of a 24-year-old man for kidney failure. And kidney failure doesn't happen to 24-year-old men who are healthy. It dies because you are beaten or you're denied water or denied access to a bathroom. And so the prison we're seeing on television, the Terrorism Confinement Center, is the newest prison they have. It was built during this thing called the State of Exception, which is when Bukele suspended due process and arrested all these people. And actually the prisoners in that prison are the ones who have been incarcerated the longest, which is why they have the gang tattoos and they look scary and they look the part, and why Kristi Noem uses them as a prop to film her little fucking TikTok video that she did down there, right? Because the optics are designed to tell you these people are monsters. They're not human. We need to lock them away. There's a threat from within our society that we need to protect you from. And in a lot of ways, Bukele's rhetoric about these prisoners is very similar to the things Donald Trump is saying about internal enemies in the United States.
Well, and I've been having trouble figuring out like how to describe this prison. I don't know if you've had this when I'm talking about it on the pod, because it's not right to just call it a prison, because then you think of like prisons in the United States where people go and they get their food and water or whatever. It is, and we've been calling it like a foreign gulag, a torture dungeon, but they are torturing people there.
Yeah,
they're starving people there, and like you said, they're like that is the goal of that prison, is to crowd people in together and like just break them.
Well, what's so telling about this is Bukele has his own minions film footage from this prison of their arrest of these men, these Venezuelan men landing in El Salvador. They release on purpose videos of these guards beating them, roughly shaving their heads, shoving their faces into the ground, shoving them onto the floor. A Time photographer was allowed to watch all this happen. He documented it. Like, Bukele wants this to be seen. He wants the brutality to be showcased because it's part of his political strength that he's the one who is tough on these gangs. And the Terrorism Confinement Center itself, it's the newest of these prisons, but that you have like dozens of men jammed into cells. There are no blankets. There are no pillows. You sleep on just metal sheets. I was listening to a journalist talk about being in there. He said no one's allowed to talk, so it's just silent at all the time. They starve them. Everyone has scabies. There are horrible infectious diseases. There's tuberculosis. There's beatings. There's murders. There's disappearances. It is like it is hell. It's hell on earth.
And that's why it's like, and I've been having trouble even saying the word deportations because this isn't a deportation.
It's a rendition.
Yeah, a deportation is like we're going to send you back to your home country, or even I think this is worse, but we're going to send you back to another country that's not even your home country, which is fucking ridiculous. But at least you go back to that country and you are free. This is like you're going to this prison, and in all likelihood you will die there.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't get out of this prison. You never have any contact with your family. You don't have contact with a lawyer or any legal counsel. Your family doesn't know if you're dead or alive. And this deal that the Trump administration has cut with Bukele to house these men, it's for a year, but there's no sort of suggestion of, is that a one-off? Will it end there? How are they thinking about this? We're paying El Salvador $6 million to house these guys.
So in the order for the Supreme Court that comes down last night, it says this order properly requires the government to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. And then it says the intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear, and it may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs, blah, blah, blah. Then it says, this is key too, for its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospects of further steps. This order, blah, 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 the Chief Justice. So today, as we're recording this, right before we recorded this, it goes back to the district judge, to Judge Paulizinis, and so she holds this. She asked the government to come in today. The government says it's too soon after the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court decision is 4 pages. They're like, we need more time. So she gives them an extension, and they have the hearing today. And she is once again furious with the DOJ because she starts off and she goes, all right, I just want basic details. Where is Garcia? What is his condition? I'm asking a very simple question. Where is he? I do not have that information, replies the Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Drew Ensign. And so then she says this is extremely troubling, the stonewalling. And she's like, "What? The Supreme Court issued an order that you're supposed to tell me." He's like, well, I haven't had a chance to, no one in the administration has the information yet. We don't know. We're still working through it. She goes, well, part of the Supreme Court's order was to tell me what steps you have taken already. Wouldn't have that information. The Deputy Attorney General, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, gave zero information to the judge.
Yeah, here's some verbatim quotes. I do not have that info. I'm saying I don't have that info as an officer of the court. My clients have not provided that info to me as of today. I'm unable to answer. Don't have knowledge of that. Like this is a trend. The Department of Justice is not providing any information to their own attorneys when they're going into courtrooms. They're also not providing any information to the public besides made up bullshit from like the DHS spokeswoman, Trisha, what's her fuck. And they're not providing any information to the counsels for these men who are deported. I interviewed a woman named Lindsay Tuzlowski, who is representing Andre Jose Hernandez Romero, who's the gay makeup artist who was deported in this mass sweep up and accused of being a member of Tren de Aragua, who's also rotting in the terrorism confinement center down in El Salvador. And she said, like many others, she only knew her client was in this prison because she saw his photo in the images that were released by the Bukele government.
It's
evil.
It's evil. It is evil
behavior. It's evil.
And so basically the hearing today ends with Judge Zinnes saying, I want daily updates every single day from the government about Garcia's condition, where he is, what's happening, what the government is doing. So that's where we are right now. But now we are in the real bad place.
Yeah.
Because like is the Trump administration outright defying the Supreme Court's order?
Right.
Kind of. They're basically saying like, well, we just don't know, and we don't, and blah blah blah, and we don't know if we can get it back, and also, this is interfering with the administration's conduct of foreign affairs. First of all, the idea
it's bullshit
that that Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president the only power to conduct any foreign affairs is insane, because we know that Congress declares war, right? We know that the Senate ratifies treaties. Yep. Right, so like the executive does not get to control every aspect of foreign policy. Also, like you said, Bukele is coming to the fucking White House on Monday.
Monday.
We have entered into a financial agreement with this country to hold these people. Also, the idea, we can't get down there. Kristi Noem is filming fucking videos there, TikTok videos in El Salvador. So it's absurd.
One phone call.
One phone call.
Also, again, Lindsay Toslowski, who's Andre's lawyer, told me ICE gets people back all the time. She was like, I've been on the border when ICE has brought people back to the United States that they wrongly deported. This is not complicated. It's not precedent creating.
Well, and they're all the administration is hanging on the Supreme Court, the part of the opinion where the Supreme Court says, like, with reasonable, you want to get them back with reasonable. Let me just sorry that. With due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch and the conduct of foreign affairs. One way you could interpret that is, if for some reason Trump calls Bukele because, he has a change of heart and wants to get this guy back, says, bring him back, and Bukele said, absolutely not.
Right.
And then the court said, you have to break off diplomatic relations with El Salvador in order to do that.
Invade the country.
Right. Then the court can't do that, right? Like, there's certain things that the court can't make the president do, but they certainly can order the fucking president and the government to give the guy a fucking call and get him back.
Make a phone call. Marco Rubio could have this done tomorrow. And, one thing I was talking about with Lindsay is, like, there's a version of this policy where they really do deport the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Actual murderers, actual rapists, actual bad people. But 60 Minutes did this really deep forensic review of all 283 men who were deported to El Salvador, and they found 12 of them who had serious criminal records, and 75% of them had no known criminal record, either in the U.S. or abroad. And they were checking records in Venezuela, court transcripts, like news reports, right? They did it as exhaustive a search as you could. And it just shows, like, they just did the most slapdash, half-assed effort possible, where someone in the Trump administration, probably Stephen Miller, told ICE to search its database for all known Tren de Aragua members. And the best ICE could do was dig up some people who had tattoos, and then they just sent them down into this nightmare hellscape. And I guess my question is, like, is it just incompetence, or is it malevolence with impunity? Because they're kind of trying to set a precedent to show we're going to do whatever we want to do. Doesn't matter.
I don't know for sure, but I would make a big bet that it's the latter.
Yeah.
I think there's obviously a lot of incompetence that goes in there. It's clear. It seems like Garcia, like the fact that they made an administrative error and oversight, like that could be incompetence too. But clearly, you see this from the way that J.D. Vance is responding to me, that Stephen Miller's responding. They want people to think we are sending these murderous gang members there, and the left is trying to, and these judges and everyone else is trying to tell us to stop doing that, but we're going to keep doing it because we want to protect the American people, because they've probably run out of criminals that they have been able to apprehend, or dangerous gang members that they've been able to apprehend, right? And they still need to send the message and show that they're tough and all this bullshit, so they're just going to keep expanding it.
And this was always the rub. Most deportations happen because ICE coordinates with local law enforcement, local prisons. They find people who have been arrested. They figure out if they have a deportation order, and they deport them.
Yes.
That's all the low-hanging fruit. That's how this usually works. But we know from the first Trump administration that Trump monitors these numbers closely. If border crossings are up, he loses his mind, and that leads to policies like family separation. And I'm sure there is a lot of internal pressure to deport more and more people and do it in the showiest, splashiest, most newsworthy way possible to appease the MAGA base. And these cruel, like, this bureaucratic evil that we're seeing is the result of that.
And they are also want to make a show of deporting people who simply just disagree, who have said, this is the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who right before we recorded, an immigration judge says that he is deportable.
Yeah.
And they might appeal that, but there's a reason for all of this, right? That they're not just sort of taking undocumented immigrants who are currently in detention and who just crossed the border over the last couple of years and deporting them, right? That would be too boring for them, and then it wouldn't make as much news, right?
Exactly.
So they want to go after these students. They want to go after people who, and now they're saying they're like monitoring immigrants who want to come to this country, or asylum seekers. They monitor their social media for anti-Semitism, right? It's anti-Semitism today. The next day it's going to be, anti-Trump
Anti-Trumpism,
sentiment, right? They stopped the lawyer from American citizen lawyer from Michigan because he's the lawyer for one of the students when he was coming back from spring break with his family and demanded to search his phone. Like, this is not just criminals that they want to deport here.
Yeah, Inside Higher Education magazine has reported that over 770 students international students have had their visas revoked so far. We don't know the details of all of those, but obviously we know it started with people who are somehow associated with Gaza protests.
Yes. And just one last thing on the Supreme Court of it all. I think we need to watch closely what happens with Judge Zinnes and the government and the updates they provide. But you can tell from the couple instances where the Supreme Court has weighed in a way that the Trump administration doesn't like, even though they're pretending otherwise. The Supreme Court are clearly writing these decisions, at least the majority is, in a way that doesn't want it. They seem to be not want to antagonize the Trump administration too directly.
Yeah.
And I think that could be because Roberts fears that if the administration outright defies them, then the Supreme Court is toothless at that point, and they're just nine people in robes. And I to an extent, I understand that, right? But now that the Trump administration continues taking rulings where they've clearly lost, or the Supreme Court has ordered them to do something, and pretend that those just aren't what they say they are, and they're just going to do what they want, and now start defying the Supreme Court of the United States, that is a moment where, like, every Democratic politician, every Republican politician who still has a conscience, every citizen needs to start speaking up and, like, get out into the streets and going crazy. Because if they defy a Supreme Court, maybe, you don't want to go to the mat for this guy Kilmar Abrega Garcia or anyone who's in this prison in El Salvador, but it's coming for all of us at this point.
Yeah, I don't use this word lightly, but like the fascistic tone has trickled down from Trump to all of his staff. Like the other day, a DHS spokeswoman tweeted a photo of a Gaza protest and said low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
So anyone who dissents, anyone who has a disagreement about a war, an ongoing war, she thinks should be deported. Like, that's a suggestion there. The other day,
dehumanizing. They want to dehumanize.
Dehumanizing. The other day, Donald Trump signed 2 executive orders about specific individuals. There was Miles Taylor, who wrote the so-called anonymous op-ed in the first term. Remember that scandal? He's a DHS employee who became a Trump critic. He also, so this executive order told the Department of Justice to investigate Miles Taylor. There was a similar one about Chris Krebs, who was like a cyber nerd, who had to make sure that our elections were secure and said they were, and Donald Trump's really mad about that. I mean, they are writing executive orders directing the Department of Justice to go after individual people for things they said. That is an abridgment of your right to free speech. It is also an outrageous abuse of the Department of Justice, weaponization of the Department of Justice. But I noticed, John, Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife, tweeted about Miles Taylor. Miles Taylor is a traitor to his country and a traitor to his former colleagues. I caught him on numerous occasions leaking information from blah, 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 blah. Bad people always have a day of reckoning. Hope you enjoy it. Like, that is like a little baby fascist.
And I don't follow Katie Miller on Twitter, but when I saw that one, I started going down her timeline, and she is really indistinguishable from Stephen Miller these days.
Yeah,
the two of them are real
thick as thieves here.
Yeah, what a couple.
Should read that tweet in the original German.
Anyway, longer than we thought we'd go, but there's just a lot. People have said, like, well, why are you guys on this so much? And the reason that we keep talking about this, and you've been interviewing so many people, and I have, and we're tweeting about it, is because I just think that this is sort of the whole ball game, and the Trump administration they're starting with people that they think are not going to draw a lot of sympathy from most of the public, but they are very quickly, since we're only a couple months in, creeping towards legal residents, green card holders, American citizens that now they're stopping that disagree with, former administration officials that they're now investigating. Like, it's happening rather quickly, and I really think people got to start speaking up about it.
And also, I want to live in a country where it's full of citizens who are offended and outraged by injustice.
Yes.
And when the United States government says, we fucked up, we shouldn't have deported this guy, but we don't care. We're not going to try to get him back. Like, that should outrage everybody. And when a gay makeup artist is deported to a nightmare gulag because he has tattoos that say mom and dad, like, if we're not speaking up for that guy, what's the point? What's the point of having a show? What's the point of having a platform? What's the point of living in a country that's supposed to be free and fair? If you don't care about like people in that situation, it does harm to everyone in the country, the values of the country, like what we stand for. It's just so fucking wrong.
And again, it's like the danger here is not that it's such a partisan issue. The danger is you have Joe Rogan who's spoken out about this.
Mm-hmm.
You have Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas joining to saying that due process is necessary. You've got conservative legal scholars, right-wing people. It is literally the danger is the people who are saying nothing.
And I think that's such an important point, because I think one of the reasons we're talking about this so much is because I think 90% of the country would be as outraged as we are if they just heard about the facts.
Yes.
And the hard thing in the Trump era is it's the Steve Bannon flood the zone with shit strategy at all times, and the markets are crashing, and he's doing this and whatever. And so we just need to continue to hammer on these cases, because, again, I was talking to Lindsay, Andree's lawyer, and I was like, how is it hard for you guys to decide to go public? I know these are complicated matters. And she said, a bunch of us attorneys who work on these cases, we sat around and we talked to each other, and we said, what would you want, if you were rotting in this prison? And she said, we didn't think that they would want to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So that's why everyone should keep talking about it.
Wow, that's a good place to end. All right. Well, we'll keep you guys updated when we hear more about this case and others like it.
Another uplifting YouTube from your friends at Crooked Media.